It feels just like yesterday when we said goodbye to one of the weirdest years in recent memory. And just like that, we are now in the month of February. With two national holidays behind us, US having a new president, Hitman 3 being praised universally, and the new consoles, well, they are still out of stock. Say what you will about 2020, it did turn out to be a fantastic year for the games industry. With player engagement reaching record numbers, some of the strongest lineup of games ever released in a single year, and two hot new consoles eager to invade the market. The past year has set the industry up for a great year ahead in 2021. So, with that in mind, here are some predictions for this year. Some that might sound obvious, and some that might make you think that it's pushing it a bit too far. All of which are very much possible. Hi, I'm Ishak, and this is the iXie Gaming Podcast. Let's begin with what we missed in 2020. Something we can hope will be back in 2021. Gaming conventions. Namely, E3. Yes, there are various business and consumer-focused gaming events throughout the year, but none bring a sense of festivity like E3 does. Granted, the show has been fumbling over the past few years, and its very relevance was being questioned by many business-focused outlets, but last year just showed us how important the show still is for the industry. With E3 being cancelled, companies big and small were scrambling to make their own digital shows, with some being more successful than others. While at the end of it all, we did get a fix of what would have been shown in E3 through various shows, the sheer amount of excitement that E3 brings was clearly missing. The level of anticipation, hype, and attention that the show generates within a few well-planned days could never be matched by the digital shows companies put out at their own leisure. I am as positive as a rational thinker as I am hopeful as a starry-eyed E3 connoisseur that the show will be back this year. Maybe not with the grandeur that we are used to, thanks to the world still recovering from the fallout of last year, and maybe not around early June, but more towards August or September. But E3 is going to be back, and as a fan, I hope it is able to bring the industry juggernauts together on stage again like the good old days, including Sony. Speaking of Sony, boy does it have a busy year ahead. Between Destruction All-Stars, Returnal, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, Gran Turismo 7, Horizon Forbidden West, and God of War Ragnarok, Sony has 6 big exclusives announced to be released this year, 4 of which are from its worldwide studios group. Sony did mention on many occasions leading up to the release of the PlayStation 5 that they will double down on exclusive titles, and this lineup sure does point at that plan being executed. That said, how feasible is this approach, and how Sony is going to execute all releases is still up for debate, given the current working conditions the world over. There is also the question of quality. Sure, more games are always good, but will all these games maintain the high standards that Sony exclusives are known for? My answer is a resounding yes. From a quality perspective, if you have been enjoying Sony's games over the last few years, then you can expect the same level of elation with their upcoming games. I would place my bets on most, if not all of Sony's exclusives to score well above 7 on an average review scale, with Sony's worldwide studios titles scoring among the high 8s and above. Such is the talent curated by Sony behind each title, and therefore the trust earned from the likes of me as a consumer. That said, the question of how many of these games are actually going to hit the store shelves makes me a bit skeptical, thanks to how the world works now. At least one, if not 2 titles from the list we discussed will be delayed to 2022. The most likely candidates being God of War Ragnarok and Horizon Forbidden West. Here's hoping that if this were the case, Sony is wise enough to accommodate that extra time for these games, instead of rushing them out and fumbling right off the gate. Speaking of rushing things and fumbling right out of the gate, let's move on to my next prediction on streaming services. Be it Google Stadia, xCloud, GeForce Now, or Amazon Luna, streaming services, for however good they have been in some respects, have always, in some way or form, felt undercooked. There have always been these areas that needed work, like latency management, or having a compelling library of games to begin with. Things like these are key, particularly when the goal is to go after the well-established console and PC market. It is no surprise then that these services have not been the runaway successes one would have hoped for prior to its release. All of that may change this year though, at least to a certain extent. Streaming technology in 2021 fares much better than it did 3 years ago. The unprecedented circumstances of last year saw various industries migrate and adapt their business, resulting in high demand for superior network and cloud infrastructure, which service providers have been able to provide. Streaming services in 2021 find themselves in a place where the bolstered infrastructure could be leveraged when things inevitably get back to normal. With new game consoles on high demand and older, more moderate PC graphics hardware struggling to keep up with modern games, the stage is set for game streaming services to thrive. There are also enough players in the domain to develop a healthy competition. All of this looks like a recipe for success. So, if these services do not rise to prominence, or at least begin to do so this year, chances are they never will. Speaking of new consoles being on high demand, things are not looking so bright for those who hope to find one waiting for them on store shelves this year as well. My view on this was strong to begin with, thanks to the hype and demand surrounding these consoles with limited supplies. Then there was a report from AMD citing shortage of chipsets for PC and consoles, at least for the first half of the year. So things are not looking to change anytime soon this year. Well, what about the second half of the year, one might wonder? The availability of chipsets for the second half of the year could only translate to increased productions after a certain period of time, depending on where the units are being manufactured. This could result in a month or two of relaxed periods this year, with supplies meeting or maybe even surpassing demands. And if this happens at all, that would be a best chance to get a new console if you're planning on getting one this year, because it will then be time for the holiday demand to kick in, making these machines a hot commodity once again this year. Overall, it looks like we may still see stocks running out for most of the year, and tales of people not being able to get one and thus miss out on great games may still be told around Christmas. So it's best we prepare ourselves for that. And speaking of high demands, the games industry's incline in the charts is unlikely to slow down in 2021. As we discussed before, last year saw the industry enjoy record numbers across the board thanks to the world in lockdown. Video games were among the go-to forms of comfort along with other entertainment products. There is no doubt that we as humans are longing for things to get back to normal. And while the world is inching ever so close to that goal every day, it is still a matter of at least a good few months this year before everything gets back to the way things were. But what happens when things do get back to normal? Will people stop playing games as much? What about the ones who were new to the gaming scene and only started enjoying games from last year? From an industry standpoint, this does not necessarily mean that all added engagements will be lost. This is far from the case. Games are as much a cultural totem as movies and music today. The various demographics who are fairly new to the medium in 2020 will most likely stick with the hobby this year for the same reason they did last year. We as humans tend to stick with things that has made an impact on us, and games did that to many last year. Then there is also the fact about the revenue games are generating. It is no secret that games have been making more money than movies and the music industry over the past few years. But the fact is now bearing fruit, with multiple billion-dollar acquisitions and major entertainment IPs given a serious treatment instead of cheap movie tie-ins. Games are now in a place where there is a grand epic experience for everyone. And for the ones looking for smaller scale games, the indie scene is as strong as it has ever been. All of this is only going to strengthen user engagement with games even further. Needless to say, it is the safest bet of them all that the games industry's momentum will not slow down this year. So, what are your predictions for 2021? What games from last year did you spend most time playing? Are you among the vast majority of people who are still trying to get a next-gen console? Let's discuss this and more in podcasts to come. Until then, I'm Ishak, and this has been the iXie Gaming Podcast. Take care, stay safe, and keep gaming.